Well, Myth Vision podcast is demon possessed and about to be exorcised by Dr. Angela Puca. Welcome to Myth Vision. How are you?
Hello, Derek. Nice to be on your Myth Vision podcast, and
Thank
I'm
you.
glad to be here for everybody who is watching this.
This has been planned for a while because I just can't get rid of these demons. They haunt me. So let everybody pay attention. Not only am I demon possessed at the moment, but the end is nigh. And if you don't think that I'm worthy to open the scrolls, here you're an eyewitness to the fact that I am. We are Myth Vision. Now, Dr. Puca, I must admit, there's going to be some fundamentalist who's going to click on this video and they're going to go, see, I knew he was possessed. He even admits it.
What's the story behind you being possessed or being convinced that you are possessed?
I think it's the fact that I just don't believe. Remember, when you're a fundamentalist Christian, you think like everyone who believes in other stuff is either by the Satan or devil or, evil. When you're a fundamentalist Christian, you think this. And I would have thought that I was spiritually possessed or demons or whatever 10, 12 years ago. So if I were listening to me 10, 12 years ago, I would think he has to be. Like, there's no way in my mind, like I was not.
What about you talking, entails that you are possessed by a demon because you're interested in esoteric stuff or for
I think
some
it's
other
just
reason?
that I didn't believe in Jesus. And I'm like, I speak like about things that are very spiritual, but because when you're a Christian, it's not that only Christianity is like the only thing you discuss. Any other gods and things like that become demons or something like evil, something like that. So I know there's someone who's going to click on this video and go, this man is possessed. But I titled it off the cuff, like randomly titled this video, just wanting to get, anything you would be interested in discussing in your expertise, of course. But it's also the occult material that a lot of people enjoy. They get into the exorcisms and the occult, demons and paganism. I thought demons were only something that Christianity and Judaism, talks about. There's a lot out there that we don't know. So I had to have you come join me.
Yes, and I've had the most pagan days. So because I was yesterday at Glastonbury and Stonehenge.
Oh wow.
Yeah, with a dear friend. So yeah, I've had a very intense couple of pagan days. So I must be channeling all of that in my answers.
If I may, like, what, just for our audience, because you've never come on Myth Vision, what is your expertise? Like, what did you specialize in? What kind of education background? And then, go ahead first. Let's do that.
Oh, my education background. So I have a bachelor's and a master's in philosophy, Eastern and Western philosophy. I also learned Sanskrit and Tibetan, and I was studying Indian and Tibetan text as an undergrad and a master's student. Then I got a PhD in anthropology of religion, which is within the field of religious studies. And I specialize, my core interest is magic. and religious practices that include some kind of magic. But religious practices of the non-Abrahamic kind, so usually polytheistic or pagan religions. So, but I say that my core interest is magic and how that gets embedded into a religious system, a religious worldview. And obviously, I'm fascinated by paganism also because of the connection to nature and how, that kind of re-enchanted worldview, the re-enchantment of the word, which is a buzzword in academia, the idea that the word is not inanimate anymore, but it has been re-enchanted. The term re-enchantment comes from Max Weber and his idea that modernity has brought about the disenchantment of the word, which means that the word is not considered to be full of magic and all things are sentient and have some kind of hidden essence, hidden power, hidden abilities to them. Whereas in religious studies, they have lately been talking about the re-enchantment of the word, especially when it comes to practices, such as paganism and other similar movements that include some kind of magic, where you have a re-enchantment of the word, because part of their religious system, their spiritual religious worldview, includes the belief that everything around us is live and sentient, and there is some degree of interaction that you can get from it. So, for instance, when you have pagans or other magic practitioners that use gemstones for specific magical purposes, that underlies the belief that the gemstone has some kind of exchange with you and with your life. So there is a perception that the gemstone is connected to you, that you are connected with the fabric of reality that surrounds you, and that a specific gemstone has a specific occult power. So this means that the gemstone is somewhat enchanted. It's not just a stone, so to speak. So yeah, I'm fascinated by these re-enchanting worldviews and religious practices, and by magic more generally.
I gotta ask the obvious question that everybody has on their mind. What is up with the moon? I mean, you love the moon.
Yes.
You've got it on your shirt. It's like it's rolling up your spine, so to speak,
Yeah.
on your background. What is the deal with the moon? You said you had tattoos. Tell us.
Yeah, I have it here. Yes. I have the alchemical symbols on my right arm, the ones that are usually connected to the masculine, which are the sun, fire, and air. And here I have the moon, the earth, and water. But yeah, what's up with the moon? I love the moon generally. I've always loved the moon, even as a child. I've always been fascinated by the moon, and I think that is very connected to the feminine, the idea of the cycles of the moon and the cycles that a fertile woman has. And I also like the idea of movement and change that the moon brings about. So the idea that, the moon looks like it's something, but every day it looks different. So in essence, it's kind of the same thing every day, but it appears in different ways along its cycle. So I'm just fascinated by this element of illusion and change, and that sense of magic that the moon, at least to me, has.
Wow, that's awesome. It's amazing. I think it was who's the stand-up comedian guy who always talked. I don't know why I can't remember his name. I'm literally blaspheming right now because he said something like, it's the guy who goes, God loves you, after he gets done saying he's gonna burn you and cook you and this and that, but I love you. Stand-up comedian, you know who I'm talking about. I'm sure everybody knows who I'm talking about in the chat. They're gonna tell me, how do you not know? Here's the guy's name. My point is, he did one stand-up comedy where he was like, you know what I can believe in? I can believe in the sun. I can believe, right? So he's seeing something, it brings life. Without it, we wouldn't live. Same with the moon, obviously. But the point is like, like this is an observable natural phenomena that he can believe in. And I thought that was an interesting take, because many of the ancients thought, the sun was something, it was a deity, it was something beyond. Obviously, they may have had a misunderstanding of some things that we today scientifically might be able to understand, but they were looking at it in a different way. They understood it differently than maybe we do today. I do have a few super chats, and I'd love to get into those, but just so everybody's understanding, Dr. Puca, you got your PhD, but you also, I'm just reading here on the religiousstudiesproject.com, you said you were born in Naples,
that's
Italy.
not, yeah, that's not up to date, but gone.
Okay.
I can correct the things that are outdated.
Yeah, I just want them to know you have your BA and MA degrees in philosophy. You said you were now a graduate teaching assistant at Leeds. That's something probably
now I'm a
outdated.
lecturer. Yeah, now I'm a lecturer.
Okay, and then you mainly studied philosophy with a special focus on Eastern philosophies and religion. Throughout her academic formation, she studied Latin, ancient Greek, Sanskrit, Tibetan, classical, and modern to translate primary sources of interest from different philosophical and religious traditions. And then during your master's degree, you expanded knowledge on religious studies, focusing on Buddhism and Indian and Tibetan religions. After your master's degree, your research shifted, like the moon, towards paganism and shamanism, particularly their contemporary manifestations in Western society. And at that time, it says your current doctoral project, which you already got through, I guess, is the, what is this? I can't even.
Autochthonous, which then became indigenous and transcultural shamanism in Italy. That's why I said it's a bit outdated as a bio.
Right.
But in the beginning, the title of my PhD dissertation was Autochthonous and Transcultural Shamanism in Italy. Autochthonous is a very technical term that means from the land. Then I changed it to indigenous because I wanted to enter the debate around the conceptualization of indigenous religions, which are different from indigenous people. And that is one of the things that I argue in my PhD. And I'm not the only one to argue that, because there are other scholars that have talked about it. But in my thesis, I argue that a specific kind of folk magic in Italy can be deemed the indigenous Italian shamanism. And of course, that has required lots of pages to conceptualize indigenous and shamanism. Because, as soon as you say that, you sort of have to premise, well, wait, before you attack me, I swear I have I have an argument for that. So,
thank you. Yeah, I got to read that someday, your dissertation.
Yeah, I'm going to publish it. I'm going to publish it with Brill, and I will be working on turning my dissertation into a book over the summer. So hopefully by the end of the summer, I will hand it in.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have to do it first, but thank you.
Well, no, I mean, you have your PhD, so you have achieved your doctorate in terms of this work. So I'm very, proud of you for that. I know that's not easy. People have told me, hey, why don't you go for your PhD? And I'm like, with what time? I don't have time to do something like that. And I wouldn't even know what I want to specialize in, because I have so many scholars who come on with various ideas that intrigue me. So it's just something that I wouldn't have the time or the money to put into. And
yeah, I was teaching, so I had a studentship for my PhD. So I think I was lucky because I never really paid for my education, because I was always able to win studentships to cover the costs, which meant that I always had to be super, always had to get the highest marks and everything. But yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do that.
But I was a nerdy kid that, I was the odd one that would cry on Sundays because I couldn't go to school. So what would you expect from someone like that?
Wow.
Yeah, because the other yes, because the other kids would think that school was something daunting. Whereas every time that I was entering the classroom, for me, it was like something so exciting. So I remember that I was so immersed in the teaching, in the lectures, and it felt like every day I would discover something amazing and new. And I remember that during the classes, in the history classes. I got so immersed in the history of Roman Empire that then when it fell, I cried for a day when I
Wow.
went home, because it felt like something that was so.
You felt like it happened in your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're so immersed in it. This reminds me, I don't know how accurate scientifically this is, but like how women mature quicker than men, I hear. And like, I don't know how accurate that is, but I've heard it said. And thinking to myself, I feel that way now about all of this that I didn't feel back then when I was actually doing school. I was like, But then later on, I get out of school. I don't have to go to school anymore. Then I want to learn all this stuff. So anyway, we got some super chats. Let's jump to some questions and let's see. By the way, she has a specialized focus. That doesn't mean she may not have an opinion on something or whatever. Keep in mind, if she doesn't know the answer, this is what academics do. And they're going to respectfully tell you, like, that's not, my field, or I'm not certain of that. But you may know something about this one. Constellation Pegasus, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Any written accounts in Judaism about demon possession? In Judaism, demons have to eat and can reproduce. Now, if I may, before I leave it off to you, it's Dr. Justin Sledge.
Yes, I was about to say that.
I just spoke to him before we did this live, and he was like, let me read you the text just so everybody can know. So that Constellation, this is kind of weird. It's like he's reading my mind. Like he knew we were supposed to answer this question or something. So he said, also, if you ever want to do a live on demons and exorcisms in Judaism, let me know. And I said, of course I do. And then, so we're going to plan that. Did you have a comment about this, or would you?
No, because I'm not an expert in Judaism. So I would encourage people to ask questions about contemporary paganism.
Okay.
Yeah, or shamanism, because those are that's my expertise. But yeah, for when it comes to Judaism, definitely Justin is the person to go to. Dr. Sledge.
So contemporary paganism, how far back in terms of your research into paganism and such do you go?
Well, in my research, I study contemporary, like things that happen now.
Right.
And in the immediate past. But by contemporary paganism, we mean the paganism that has emerged around the 1950s in the 20th century, even though there were claims of it being much older than that. But these claims have been widely disproven by scholars in history. One of them is Professor Roland Hutton, who's kind of a superstar in the field of paganism and pagan studies.
Excellent. Okay. Constellation, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Topic discussed. Gary, what is up? What is this new little nifty icon by my name? You are a member, my friend. Your sins are cleansed. So, Gary, you are a member of Myth Vision. That means that you can at least commit 3 sins. They're already forgiven. After that, though, we got to talk. So thank you so much for that.
It's nice how you play the Vatican.
I do, but I'm much more forgiving. I try to be more merciful than some of them. So you gotta be nice. Thank you so much. I did not mention yet, but I hope that everybody goes, and I'm going to pin this here. This is her YouTube channel, and she has a large YouTube channel. Please go subscribe. She is constantly putting out new material. If you're interested in actually, I suspect you take requests and stuff for those who are Patreon members, you can go and join her Patreon. You can throw out ideas and communicate to her. She is a current scholar, PhD in the field. So please go support the academics in the field and join her Patreon. What do you offer with your Patreon?
It really depends on the tiers. The tier that the person decides to pledge to. So, for instance, the initiates get the script of my videos. From the philosophers onwards, philosophers up, they get the priority access to my videos.
Mm-hmm.
Then, for the Magus level patrons, we have a monthly lecture on primary sources. So, for instance, last month we did Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley. And we will actually continue this month, studying and lecturing on Aleister Crowley and that specific book, especially part 3, because we realize that there's so much more to say. And then the Archmage level patrons get a one-to-one conversation with me. And the higher level, the Demiurge level, they get sort of a private lecture on a topic they choose.
That's awesome. I like the little the doll that you're using. Like, what is that doll from? That reminds me of Chucky in a way.
Yeah, that was created by a friend of mine who's a game developer. And I just so he created it, and I was there, and I just wanted a doll that resembled me somehow. So,
Now, can they poke that doll and it hurts you? I'm just kidding.
that's a good question. Maybe I shouldn't have gone for a doll, considering the considering the subject matter. Maybe that wasn't a great idea. I just realized.
Well, just so everybody knows, I pinned her YouTube channel in the comment section at the top. Please go subscribe to Angela's. I'm planning on having her come back more and more here on Myth Vision to come hang out with us and learn more, because there's a lot we probably aren't even going to scratch the surface on today about contemporary paganism, and of course her research and studies and things you should learn. You can also join Myth Vision's Patreon, where we work very hard at what we do, get early access and private message me and whatever you'd like to do in that respect. But working very hard to try and bring you more material. So that's enough about our plugs. I wanted to ask you, since your specialty is in particular contemporary paganism, were you how do I put this? What made you interested in paganism? Were you always kind of someone who was into this kind of stuff before you went for your PhD doctorate?
So, that's a good question. So I think that as I said, my core interest, research interest, and perhaps interest is magic. And I was fascinated by that since I was a child, really. And I think that and then I started to study very complex texts when I was a teenager. Things in ceremonial magic, which I'm not sure I was prepared to, to read at 13, 14. But I think that I got into paganism because it was religious practice that had magic embedded in its worldview and in its religious system. So I thought that's the first thing that attracted me about paganism, and also the connection to nature. Although I know that now in recent years that has been sort of reassessed, because usually contemporary paganism has often been described as an earth worshipping religion. And lately, since there are for instance, Telemites and other types of magicians that identify as pagans, and that they are not particularly nature worshipping, that element is considered perhaps a bit more fluid. But there are elements of paganism. All the elements of paganism just fascinate me immensely. The perception that everything is interconnected, the polytheism, the conceptualization of the gods, and indeed demons. So, for instance, in Abrahamic religions, you have the idea that there is a creator God that has created everything and then stays outside of the world. And that is the difference between transcendence and immanence. So, transcendence means that the God is outside of nature, has created nature, and then stays outside of it. Whereas an immanent view of the divine means that the divine is imbued in everything that you see, in everything that you touch. So that means that everything material in paganism is sacred, and it is in a way divine. And the gods in paganism are not gods creators, they are inhabitants of, well, that depends on whether you are a hard or a soft polytheist, but gods are usually conceptualized as entities that inhabit a different realm of reality, or even archetypes, psychological archetypes, that are able to interact with our mundane daily life and world in a way that they can affect our what happens to us. and influence what happens to us. And the same goes for spirits. Spirits are often talked about in shamanism, but also in paganism. So you have this idea of spirits and deities and gods and goddesses, and it gives a sense that the creation, everything is in an ongoing state of creation, as opposed to Abrahamic religions that tend to have a more linear perception of time. So there is creation and then time moves forward. In paganism, you often have the sense that there is an ongoing sense of creation, and the gods participate into this continuous ongoing creation just as much as human beings, as trees and the sky and the animals populating the earth. So there's a sense of interconnectedness between everything, and I find that particularly fascinating. And also the idea that it's not a revealed religion, so you don't have scripture, you don't have a messiah, you don't have a prophet. So there's more of a sense of a direct connection with the divine.
Like if
uh,
you want to access the divine, go out and look at the
and
sunset
access the
and
divine.
go into the go into the woods, go out to the beach, go look at nature and connect with it, is the idea.
Yes, and also you have priests and priestesses in paganism, but they tend to be more like leaders of groups and covens rather than, so you don't have the sense that the priest or priestesses has privileged access to divine, but more than they help the others in the group to get in contact with the divine. So it's more like a friendly help of a big brother or a big sister who perhaps has more experience than you. So there isn't really that sort of hierarchical perception. And also, paganism is very individualistic in the sense that pagans usually are very anti authority. So they don't like hierarchies and they don't like authorities. And there is quite often the sense that pagans quite often tend to individually tailor their practices to see what suits them best, what is that resonates with them, they incorporate in their practices. And yeah, and also there's the perception that the land is sacred and also plays a major, an important role. There are several aspects of paganism that I find absolutely fascinating, and also of shamanism. I think that shamanism and paganism are quite intertwined, and one may even argue that shamanism may fall under the umbrella of paganism, because paganism is considered an umbrella term for a number of earth-based, um, or earth-worshipping religions, even though, as I said, that definition of earth worshipping is a bit fluid now, that there are other types of magic practitioners that are identifying as pagans. And then you have the sense that since there are correspondences, so they embrace that perception from the Renaissance and from the Hermetic philosophy of correspondences between the above and the below. So everything, so it's like there's the fabric of reality, and you are immersed in it, and everything is interconnected. So you need to find the right correspondency so that you are able to pull the exact string that you need to move something at a distance, or to manipulate reality in the way you wish. But it's not just about magic and manipulating and affecting your reality. It is also about changing yourself and being in a state of connectedness. Because if everything is interconnected and you enter into this web of interconnectedness and affect reality, then you are affected as well, because you are also connected to that web. So you cannot just disentangle yourself from that process. So it's also a process of self-discovery and changing that affects yourself and changes yourself as you change the outside. But yeah,
There's
that was
so
very
much. Yeah,
there's a lot.
like there's so many interesting things that you're saying there that make me like have questions. So I'm gonna get a few super chats here, and then I'd love to ask you some ideas that I think about this whole earth worship thing. So, Gary, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Was there any connection between Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology? Do you know if there's any connection?
There is a loose connection because one of the most famous Thelemites is what's his name? There's a recent TV show on him, Jack Parsons. Remembers. So Jack Parsons, there's a TV show called Strange Angel, which I would highly recommend. I found it quite interesting, and it centers around Jack Parsons, who was a famous American Thelemite, and he is somewhat connected to Ron Hubbard and the creation of Scientology. So there is kind of a loose. So I wouldn't say that Scientology has a direct link to Aleister Crowley and his philosophy, because that isn't the case. So there's just a loose connection by association. But I haven't looked into that too much in terms of my research, but it's possible that there has been some influence from Thelema to Ron Hubbard. But yeah, I'm not completely sure because I haven't investigated that specifically. But Aleister Crowley has basically influenced to some degree all the whole lot of Western esotericism. Even though I'm not sure Scientology could enter the realm or could be considered part of Western esotericism. Maybe not. But yeah, there is some loose connection, but I wouldn't say a direct influence.
There's something weird, I think, just on this subject. L. Ron Hubbard made this wild accusation or claim that he was the Antichrist, and that he like said some things that I would see Aleister Crowley saying, like Crowley, however you pronounce his last name. My point is like, there were Scientologists, like one of the ladies I talked to, Karen de la Carriere, who's like, why would he say this? And it got him into a lot of like trouble with some of the higher people in Scientology who were like, what the heck is he saying? And it sounded like there was some type of influence, like Crowley might have read of, I'm sorry, not Crowley, but Hubbard might have read of Crowley and may have heard some of the things he was saying, or was influenced in some way to make the stand that he was an Antichrist. Because what's weird about it is we know Crowley came from a Christian background. So like, he viewed himself kind of in this opposition as a person who's going to practice magic, of course, but he like is in opposition to fight against that Abrahamic faith that he once had and that authoritarian, religion, from what I understand. Am I correct in this? I've been told this.
Yeah, I would say that kind of Nietzsche made it popular to be the Antichrist. But yes, I think that some of these claims at the time, the early to mid 20th century, to me seems like they wanted to be provocative and sort of catch the attention of the public, because of course being the beast 666 is something that will attract attention. But also I think that with Crowley, he wanted to highlight that he was sort of the figure of the adversary, so he wanted to classify himself as a adversarial figure, and he was clearly antinomian, so he rejected the societal norms. So
he made his own laws, or he comes up with his own laws and stuff.
So your question was why Ron Hubbard would
maybe he went with what you're saying, like he wanted to catch attention, so he says it, or he started losing his mind at the end. I don't know, but that's also an option.
Even Marilyn Manson has said something like that. I guess there's the album Antichrist Superstar or something like that. But yeah, I think that the concept of the Antichrist has become a bit romanticized after the Romanticism and this new perception of Satan as this romantic hero. That I have a video actually about that, how Satan got romanticized during the Romanticism, because he starts to be seen a little bit thanks to the secularization and the idea that people were not as scared of Satan being the actual real evil incarnate, but Satan becoming more like a mythological figure, so less scary because it felt less real. So that process of cultural secularization, plus the connection that was created thanks to literature and poetry between Satan and these rebellious, these somebody who dared to rebel against God, and so it became a romantic um, ideal that was also connected to the revolutions during that time. And so it assumed this connotation of being anti-establishment, and at the same time for freedoms and for the freedom of exploring your pleasure in life, and the freedom against a religious status quo dictated by the dominant Christian system. And so quite often you see that kind of romanticization and that perception of the Antichrist also linked to, being very immersed in hedonistic pleasures, and not rejecting the pleasures of the world,
Mhm.
as opposed to what a religion like Christianity may suggest. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that it is linked to that kind of romanticization of the figure of Satan, and also I'd say, that sense of, we have the cookies and stuff.
Thank you so much for that. Gary, thanks for that super chat. Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger. Thank you, Pat, for the super chat. Exorcisms were ubiquitous. I hope I'm saying that properly. In the ancient Mediterranean and ancient Near East, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Christianity's ritual codified by Basil and Chrysostom. That is an interesting thing, because I titled this with exorcism in the title. And is that something that contemporary pagans practice? And if so, what role does exorcism play in your research?
Um, so no, I wouldn't say that exorcism plays a big role in paganism. You may have something kind of similar in shamanism, and perhaps you may have some similar practice in paganism, but it's different. So, for instance, in shamanism, you would have the perception that in some shamanic practices, they think that since they have an animistic worldview, which means that everything has a soul, then even things that happen to your body have their own spiritual identity, which means that if you have a disease that could classify as a demon, and so you may have rituals of extractions rituals, where you would extract the demon out of the body, but demon would be the illness, so the spirit of the illness. So if you see that everything as a soul or a spirit, then it means that even your organs are spirits, and even things that happen to your body, like a disease, may classify as an entity of some sort. And usually demons are associated to detrimental entities. And so you would have that a specific illness is a demon that needs to be extracted from the body. So in that case, you could say it is some kind of exorcism. And you do have exorcisms in native forms of indigenous shamanisms too. So the kind of exorcism that we would see more as exorcism, like resulting from a spirit possession. And even in that case, I have a video on spirit possession and the different kinds of spirit possession. So in some cases, you have that there is a cohabitation with the host, with the person, and in other cases, you have that the demon completely takes over. And but this tends to be a perception that happens, that has become more popular through Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have that in indigenous shamanisms. Contemporary paganism, however, since often tended to find its identity in, I wouldn't say in contrast, but contemporary paganism tended to see itself as different from Christianity. So there are certain elements that are considered culturally as linked to Christianity that pagans just don't adopt at all. So for instance, in Wicca, which is possibly the most popular contemporary pagan religion, you don't have demons at all. They are not featured in the worldview. And there are certain entities that would be classified as demons that for pagans are considered deities, like Lilith, for instance. So they don't have the concept of demons in that sense. But you do have the concept of demons in shamanism and perhaps in other pagan practices. But I wouldn't say it's particularly prevalent. Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
he follows up with another one. Thank you, Pat. Everybody go subscribe to Biddy Buddha, by the way. That's the channel that he's always on. So it's really interesting. He always has these fun facts that he brings on. Given the prevalence of polis religious system in ancient societies, is the individualism of modern paganism a hallmark differentiation?
Of contemporary paganism?
Is the individualism of modern or contemporary paganism a hallmark differentiation?
I think it is definitely something that differentiates paganism from other religious practices, because there is more of a direct individual connection to divine and the perception that you don't have to follow a dogma. You have that pagans form communities, but the formation of communities tends to be more loose, and the majority of pagans are solitary practitioners who may attend at times public events, but more often than not, they practice by themselves.
Now, in the ancient world, just like an example, Christians are somewhat like that today, where it's like I have my own little private Christian relationship with Jesus, but like he's describing here with the polis religion, that like the whole community or the nation follows a certain practice or whatever. Was paganism, from your research, and I know you specialize with contemporary, but I'm sure you know about ancient pagan ideas. Did they have kind of a nationalistic or a communal where it wasn't so individualistic? Like today, I could go down to a Baptist church, walk in, attend service, walk out, never have to come back. Nobody's checking on me. I can have my own private religious practice and whatnot. Do you know if ancient paganism was like that? If it was like individualistic like today, or if it was a communal thing where it was like, hey, Bob's not showing up to the shaman rites, he needs to come show up, or Sally needs to make her butt down here and check, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So, first off, it's difficult to call the ancient pre-Christian practices as pagan religion in the singular, because it was, well, obviously they didn't define themselves as pagans because that's a later term, but also you don't have a Unitarian religious system or a Unitarian religious practice. You have more patterns of religious beliefs and practices. But yeah, I would say that generally it was more communal than contemporary paganism is. And that's also a difference between transcultural and indigenous shamanism. So indigenous shamanism tends to be more based around on the community, whereas transcultural shamanism, which is the form of shamanism that is not linked to a specific place or to a specific initiation, is like core shamanism by Michael Harner, that focuses on the techniques rather than the place, the tradition, the initiation, the bloodline. And so it is transcultural. So whether you do a shamanic journey in Italy or in the UK or in the US, you're supposed to get the same exact results. Whether you do it by yourself on your couch or in the woods, under a full moon, you're supposed to get the same exact results. So there's a focus on the technique rather than the cultural context and initiation, the bloodline, and all these other elements. So you also have the difference there. So with indigenous shamanism, there's more of an emphasis on the community. With transcultural shamanism, which is particularly popular in the Western world, there's more of a focus on the individual and the self-discovery, the self-development, the self-healing, or the healing of people in your family close to you, connected to you, not to your community, not to your town, for instance. And with paganism is a bit similar, I guess, in that contemporary paganism tends to have that individualistic element,
Mhm.
but they also have a communitarian element to that. But I'd say that mostly there is individualism. So every pagan won't follow a specific dogma. Every pagan will tailor their own religious belief depending on their practices, their experiences, and the worldview that they resonate with the most. So
You're
there
gonna
is,
laugh. You're gonna laugh. When I was a Christian, like a real fundamentalist who spoke in tongues, we spoke in tongues. We were praying to Jesus, and I was at this house church, and every October on Halloween, we got together and we would sit in there and we'd praise Jesus and worship, and then we would like go into these kind of trance-like states where we would like sit here and be rebuking the demons and the spirits of the pagans because we believed that. I know this is crazy sounding. Our audience is probably thinking to me like, "What, Derek? You used to do this?" But we would sit there and be like trying to like fight the spirits of pagans who were human sacrificing on this day. Like we believed that they were in the woods sacrificing a human and all this kind of stuff, and we're sitting there like trying to like fight against these pagan ideas. I remember this stuff when we were in this little trance and trying to like fight these spiritual battles. But that leads my question. I just want to throw out there is like, do pagans do human sacrifice today? Is it something that happens but they keep it hush hush? Is there any reality to that, or is that a polemic that Christians have invented in their minds because they see it as like, ooh, no, that's so bad. You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely the latter. Well, no, I wouldn't say that Christians have invented that because I don't want to blame Christians. I try to be sort of welcoming towards any kind of religious practice and religious belief. But yeah, I would say that it is something that is not, it's made up. And pagans tend to live in societies with laws, and like other people tend to follow the laws. And if you don't, regardless of your religious belief, you will pay for it
Mm-hmm.
depending on the country and the laws of your country. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering that silly question.
no, that's fine.
Crawford Fulton King, thank you for the super chat. I have a Thelamite friend who believes that Crowley tried to steer Parsons away from Hubbard. Love you both. Interesting.
Hmm. I don't know about the controversy around it, but I can tell you that apparently the right pronunciation is Crowley.
Crowley.
Because he wrote a poem where his name would rhyme with holy.
Ah,
So Crowley Holy. Obviously,
that makes sense.
yeah, Crowley was definitely self-loving himself quite a lot.
Yeah. Thank you,
And,
Crawford. Thank you. Sherry D, does paganism regard everything in nature as having some level of consciousness or awareness? Thank you, Sherry, for the super chat.
yeah, I would say so. I think that that could be considered a pantheistic worldview. So pantheism means when the divine is in everything. Pan means everything in Greek, and theos means God. So pantheism is the idea that the divine is in everything. So yeah, as I explained in my overview of paganism, I would say so, that there is this perception that everything has some kind of consciousness, everything is sentient somehow.
Mhm. Thank you, Sherry, for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Grays174, do you believe in any kind of eternal hell? So, what does paganism teach about eternal hell? Is there anything like that? Or what do they think happens when you die?
Um, so no hell, apart from this one. I'm kidding. But no, I say that a lot of pagans. So, well, you have the idea of the Summerland in Wicca, but I'd say that the majority of pagans in my research, the pagans that I've come across in my fieldwork, usually believe in reincarnation. In fact, it is very common for pagans to do a ritual called regression, a ritual of regression, so that they can remember past lives. And it is also quite common among pagans to hit on a woman saying, "We were lovers in a past life."
Oh
So
wow.
that's
This
like the next level catch-up line.
I've heard there are shamans in South America that do ayahuasca rituals, and they like help get people through them. They do them so much that in their ayahuasca experience, they marry the woman in the other realm that they're experiencing in the shaman ritual, and they divorce the woman in this where we are today. Like they do so many of these rituals and go into this place where they're in this ayahuasca ritual. They literally will divorce the woman here to marry the woman in the ayahuasca realm. Like that's just kind of funny to me that I don't know why I thought about that connection when you're like, you did what in your last life? Oh heck no. Like that's silly, but you know, I think it's kind of funny, but anyway, it's sad too at the same time. But
Yeah, but I've also done field work with Mapuche shamans in Argentina, so in South America. So not all indigenous shamans use psychotropic drugs. In fact, for some reason, the ones that I've done research with didn't use drugs at all, psychotropic plants. So that's interesting. And I would still do these rituals of regression without the use of these substances, just, by using certain rituals.
thank you, Grays. Mr. Monster, thank you for the super chat. Says, I'm pretty much atheistic pagan, and Balder, I think I'm saying that right, is my Patreon. But I love learning history and all sorts of ancient gods. Pagan religion is fascinating. Thank you for the super chat and for being a member, my friend.
Yeah,
Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that just reminds me that I think that atheistic paganism is understudied, and I think we need to study that more. So you may have given me an idea for a future paper.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question earlier, but Mr. Monster kind of addresses it by saying that's what he is. So was like, can you be an atheist and still kind of look at nature in a mystical sense? Because, well, I look at the world around me and think, wow, often like I'm in awe of nature and just what this is that we live in. But I don't necessarily think there's some metaphysical or spiritual thing behind it. I'm just still impressed with nature itself. Nature is more powerful than me. I am just a part of this. Like if it, they say that, like I've watched those Survivor shows on TV before, and they're like, Mother Nature will kick your ass if you do not work with her. So don't try to fight it. You have to learn how to survive using it, or you're going to die. And so, nature's powerful. And so I don't know. What is this? Is this something you put some thought into?
So this is of course not based on research, but it is more an educated guess. So sometimes I feel I don't want to, I hope I'm not undermining anyone's belief. So just take this as my preliminary opinion, and I may be wrong on it. But sometimes I feel that those who identify as atheistic pagans have a very specific idea what atheism is, that is quite based on Abrahamic religions. So the idea that in order to be theistic, you need to have a certain perception of the divine that resembles the monotheistic religions. But in the example that you gave, Derek, the idea that you see nature and you are in awe, but you don't see spiritual essence behind it, then I would say that is not a pagan worldview. I'd say it is more a respect and admiration of nature. So I would be interested in studying more atheistic paganism to better understand it, because it's understudied. And
You ever heard of the term God-fearers for the pagans who went to the synagogues and they saw admiration? They said, "Oh, we kind of like some of the things you Jews are saying, but we're not going all the way and actually becoming, a Jew." It makes me kind of wonder if like pagans would have that kind of concept for people like me who are in awe of nature, right? They respect nature, they love. There's something in common here. However, I don't go that far to think like, there's a spirit or everything is in essence and conscious and whatnot. I have a limit where I would draw that line for me. You know what I mean? But I wonder if they would have that respect and go, well, we can nod our hat and say, okay, respect. I don't know.
mm, yeah, I'm not sure. I'd be interested in understanding whether that classifies as paganism, or maybe the definition of paganism needs to be extended to include that side of it. That yeah, people that identify as atheistic pagans. But as I said, it's under researched, and it fascinates me.
I can't wait to see what you come up with. Grays 174 says, "Does the concept of Jesus dying for our sins make sense to you? I've never understood the mechanics of how you even get from A to B like that." So as someone who studies paganism, what do they think about this idea that Jesus dies for people's sins?
Well, pagans, not being Christians, don't entertain the idea of Jesus dying for our sins. So it's not. It's just not part. Some pagans just think that Jesus was a prophet. Um, so I'd say that there is respect of Christianity and of the deity in Christianity and Jesus and the Holy Mary, but I wouldn't say that they believe in the fact that Jesus died for our sins. However, there will be Christians that will remind pagans of that, because I just got reminded of being at a ritual, at a pagan ritual, for field work, and there was it was in the woods, and there was a Christian walking past, and she just seeing people in circles wearing robes, and having the regalia of and the altar and everything. She asked the priest and the priestess what god they were worshipping, and the priest and the priestess said, we are worshipping the spirits, nature, we are connecting to nature. And then she started lecturing everybody about the fact that Jesus died for our sins, and that everybody there would go to hell and these kind of things.
Oh man.
So I wouldn't say that it's something that it's a concept that pagans entertain, but sometimes, at least in my personal experience, you may have the odd Christian that will remind you of that as a pagan.
Yeah, I can't. I get annoyed by it personally, but Abel, thank you for the super chat. What if Satan is the true creator, good in the sense that he creates life, bad in that he has karmic laws? He is a son of God and also our egos.
Wow, that's a lot to be.
I don't know what to say, man. I don't know what to say.
There are some Satanists that believe that. So that my fieldwork is mainly in Italy.
Okay.
Because I'm Italian, if you guys couldn't tell by my accent. But yeah, there is a form of Satanism in Italy that is called spiritual Satanism, and they have the kind of view of Satan, and also that Satan is love. And sometimes it's interesting because in this spiritual Satanism, it's interesting because they have certain conceptions that are usually associated by the god of Christianity, but they attribute it to Satan. And then they also include some pagan elements, like the celebrating the 8 festivals of the years that were popularized by Wicca, by the Wiccan tradition. The solstices, the equinoxes, and the midpoints, the 8 festivals. So yeah, maybe not sure about the karmic law and the Son of God, but you may have some Satanists that have that see Satan as a creator. In other cases, not as much. Yeah, there are different conceptualizations in Satanism. That's another thing that I want to research more.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Abel. Topic discussed. Gary says, did Crowley, I'm trying to pronounce it properly here, or Thelemy adopt Masonic ceremonies? Is there any connection between paganism and Masonry?
So Crowley or Thelema, so which actually in Greek it's a Greek term, and in Greek it's actually pronounced telema, but I know that English speakers pronounce it Thelema, so I'm
Thelema.
going for the English pronunciation. So the rituals created by Crowley were based on a few different things, but they were based a lot on the rituals of the Golden Dawn rather than Freemasonry. Now, ceremonial magic has had some influence from Freemasonry, but even in that sense, it's not you don't really see. I wouldn't say that there is a such a direct connection, but you have the system of degrees that is influenced by Freemasonry. So I would say that there is some influence there. In ceremonial magic, you have some influence from Freemasonry. What was the other question? Is there any connection between paganism and Masonry?
Same thing, pretty much.
So considering that there is a little bit of influence, because you know that Gerald Gardner, the founder of Wicca, and Wicca is the most popular pagan religion. I have a video on that. Does Wicca come from Crowley? So in case viewers are interested. And in that video, I explained that Gerald Gardner knew Aleister Crowley. In fact, he was initiated into the OTO. And so there has been an influence, especially in terms of rituals from the OTO on early Wicca, on Gardnerian Wicca. So yeah, and so if we say, so it's sort of it's not a direct influence, but if you see that there is some influence that Freemasonry had on the Golden Dawn, and then the Golden Dawn on Crowley, and then Crowley on Wicca, maybe you could see a connection, but it's sort of a you lose something, along all of these steps and evolutions.
Thank you. Appreciate the super chat. Gary, go subscribe to Topic Discuss. It's my buddy Gary. Constellation Pegasus. I'm confused on what modern paganism means in this discussion.
I think as I said in the beginning of the discussion, by modern paganism, we may define, well, it's difficult to define definitely modern paganism or contemporary paganism, but I'd say it is an umbrella term to identify a set of religious movements that are very much based on the earth and on the immanent sense of the divine, on recognizing the female and the male principles in reality, in the divine word, and in everything. So you have, especially in Wicca, but also in paganism, you have this idea of the female and the male as two principles in nature, like a principle that is more active, another one that is more receptive. Um, and also the idea that you don't have, it's not a dogmatic religion, it's not a revealed religion, it is polytheistic, acknowledges the existence of multiple entities, and you don't have a standardized ethics. So the ethics of pagans is based on individual perception, or in some cases, like in Wicca, they have the Wiccan Rede, and so they have the perception, the belief that they everything that they do will get back to them threefold times. So that is one ethical stance that they have in Wicca, but other pagans don't endorse that. So this is what contemporary paganism is a set is an umbrella term to that encompasses a set of religious practices that have these characteristics. But it is a very fluid phenomenon. It's not like defining a specific form of Christianity or Judaism. Paganism, as I said, being non-dogmatic tends to be more fluid, and it's more difficult to define. And perhaps research, well, there are different difficulties depending on the research topic, but definitely one that paganism poses is that it eludes a very stark definition. So you need to be clever with methodology to capture what it is. So have a clear definition without sort of altering or tainting its nature to make it resemble something that it isn't, just to make it clear.
Thank you, Constellation Pegasus. I enjoyed your responses, Dr. Puca, and like these are many reasons why our next super chat, I would say it's better than what I've found in Abrahamic ones. So, No More Religion has a YouTube channel if you're interested in looking at critical responses to Abrahamic religions. Biggest reason paganism is better than Abrahamism. So I know you don't like to get into controversy. That is not the goal. But I am interested in giving, like, in your research, what would you say is the biggest reason that paganism is a better form of religion, if you will, or belief, whatever, than the Abrahamic ones?
Okay, so I don't like the idea of paganism being better, because better is, implies that Abrahamic religions are worse, and I don't like to define paganism in that kind of opposition. So I could say that what pagans find in paganism that they did not find in Abrahamic religion. So I would put it more in terms of why would somebody that is born in a country or in a family that is, for instance, Christian, which is what happens more often with pagans, why would they detach themselves from Christianity? What they find in paganism that they didn't find in Christianity, which doesn't make paganism better, but it's just something that some people find is missing for them in Christianity, which is different as a concept. So pagans tend to feel that in paganism they find a contact with the word. They find that the sense of connection with the divine that is more direct. They don't have the idea of sins. You don't have a god that judges you. You don't have the idea that the god is transcendence. So there are some people that enter paganism and define themselves as pagans because they like that idea of being in direct contact with the divine and to be connected to nature in a way that is meaningful and sacred, and to experience the pleasures that you have in life as something that is part of the divine and that is sacred rather than something that is sinful. um, and also, magic, of course, plays a role for some pagans. The idea that you can practice magic and that is possible, and it can even be integral to your religious practice, is also something that appeals to some pagans. So I'd say that overall, the sense of not following a dogma, having a direct contact with the divine, and that you achieve even through your contact with nature or with deities or with spirits, the sense that you don't have the perception of sins and a very standardized ethics or morality. You don't have a hell where you go to if you behave in not in accordance with a specific deity. You may have contrasts with deities because you don't do what pleases them, but that's different. It's more like having a friend that gets angry at you rather than having the creator god sending you to hell for eternity. It's a very different concept. So I'd say that pagans tend to be fascinated by all of these elements. And also there's the idea of that Abrahamic religions tend to be very male focused, and in paganism you have the goddess and the goddesses. So you have the feminine, the divine feminine. You also have the divine masculine, of course, but the divine feminine is sort of something that you don't particularly find, I would say, in Abrahamic religions, and it is quite prevalent. In fact, I was yesterday at the goddess temple in Glastonbury, and the figure of the goddess was, of course, um, featured there as the primary deity in that specific context. But and you also have form of paganism that focus solely on the goddess, like Dianic forms of paganism. But mostly pagans are about balance between the feminine and the masculine, these two principles in reality, and the goddesses and the gods. And there are also deities that are, you know, not just one or the other, but a mixture of the two. So they could be seen as two polar opposites on a spectrum rather than just either or.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are plenty of reasons. I think personally, I would say paganism sounds more interesting than Abrahamic ones. Thank you for that super chat. Mr. Monster, as an atheistic pagan, I believe the personalities of gods are real. I just don't have evidence that gods exist, but I do believe some spiritual aspects.
Then I would say that you are not atheist, you are nihilist. You don't believe in the existence of gods. No, sorry, let me read again. So as an atheistic pagan, I believe the personality of gods are real. I just don't have evidence that gods exist, but I do believe some spiritual aspects. Oh, so you are not a nihilist because you do believe in the existence of something, whereas nihilists don't believe in the existence of anything.
Right. Or at least
Um,
nothing in terms of deities, is what you're saying.
mm. So, but I'm not sure it sounds to me like atheistic.
Right.
Hmm. Because there is the belief in gods. So you are believing in gods. Those are
Yeah. If he, I don't know. I mean, I can't read his mind, right? But like
yes.
for me, for example, when I watch the Hulk, or I watch Iron Man, or I watch Spider Man, or something, and I know this fictional character has a personality in the show, I'm living it as if this is some reality to me, even though it is a fiction. For me, I don't think they believe. I don't believe they exist. I don't believe in any literal sense. I think this is a well put together narrative that comes to life in my mind. But I would say if that's the angle I'm taking, and I give these stories and characters personalities in my mind, I don't believe that ontologically require that would make me still atheistic. But if you're suggesting you really believe there's personalities, there's really something to this in the literal sense, where do you draw that line? I mean, it's kind of hard, because if what comes to life is what our consciousness has made of it, right? Even though I know it's fiction and invented, let's say, would you consider that person still an atheist if they are saying, I don't believe any of this stuff literally is true? There's no real spirit behind all of this that's doing these things, but I can role play. I can enjoy playing along with this, and it comes to life in my imagination, in my thinking, but it's not that I really believe these things are true. Do you see
Mhm.
what I'm trying to? It's kind of difficult to parse out, but
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit difficult. I'd say an atheist would not believe in the existence of God or gods.
right, simple, right?
Mm. Or spiritual entities, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and defining what that means, getting into exactly what that means. So, I know I fall in that category, but yeah, Mr. Monster, I don't know, my friend. You would have to be the one who tells us where you're at. But it's okay either way, whatever your beliefs are. Constellation Pegasus, modern paganism is just like institutionalized religion. It's fractured and no central belief that doesn't morph in time. Some things never change.
um, I wouldn't agree that it is like institutionalized religion. Well, I guess it depends. Like there are some forms of paganism, like Gardnerian Wicca, that are more initiatory, that they are more structured and more institutionalized. But there are, I'd say, the majority of contemporary pagans tend to have a very individually tailored, not particularly structured system. Mm. Maybe there are some common points and common patterns though. But yeah, I guess it's a bit difficult to tell to say whether it is like institutionalized religion, because which religion are we referring to?
Right. It's fractured though. There's different types.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is fractured.
So thank you, Constellation, for the super chat. Few more here, and then I want to ask my question. I've been holding on to one that I wanted to get your opinion on just to go way, way back. But vaguely agnostic with the 666. Thank you for the super chat, my friend, and being a member. Do you think Quimby, Ernest Holmes, the New Thought movement from last century, where they believe God is in everything, would be considered paganism?
I'm not familiar with this movement, so I don't think so, though.
Okay. So you would, I would imagine if it's contemporary or somewhat in the last century, you would have heard of it if it was related. So, okay. Vaguely agnostic. Thank you for the super chat. Feel free to email me too if you have any follow-up information. And I am in contact with, I'm in contact with Dr. Puca, and I suspect you wouldn't mind me sending you anything like that might give more data to come behind it. Maybe you look at it and go, "Ooh, interesting connection. Maybe there's something." I don't know. Thank you. Grays 174. Do you know the plausibility of necromancers in Judea in 30 AD stealing Jesus' body to do magic? Was that common enough to be likely? So this is outside of her specialty. However, I will be having Dr. Sledge on, and he might have an opinion on this because he recently did something with Religion for Breakfast on magic and Jesus and stuff. So I'm sure you saw that episode, right?
Yeah, that was very interesting. I also have an episode on whether Jesus was a magician, but that's a bit different.
I didn't know that. Okay. How long ago did you make that video?
I think a year ago.
I gotta find that. I'm gonna have to find that and watch it for sure. I did pin her YouTube channel in the chat, so everybody please go subscribe to her YouTube channel. There is endless material if you want to dive deeper. Some of your questions might even get answered in here.
Oh, here it is. Was Jesus a magician? The blue one, a bit up there.
Okay. This one right here. Let me post that in the chat so everybody, in case they don't want to hunt, I can actually put it there so they can go and put it on your watch list or whatever, or you can watch it as soon as we're done here so that you can go subscribe to her YouTube channel. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear your take on it as someone who's in this pagan and magic research. So thank you, Grays, for the super chat, my friend. All right. Did we catch up? Hold on. I don't want to leave anybody hanging here. No, we got one more, I think. And then I wanted to ask one question, and then we got to let you go. Crossover Maniac, has any of these pagans obtained any knowledge from these past live regression rituals that couldn't get, that I suspect that they couldn't get any other way?
Yeah, pagans believe so. They believe that by gaining knowledge about past lives, they are able to better understand aspects of this life that are otherwise unexplainable, or there are in some cases recurring patterns in their lives, and when they recall a previous life when that pattern either originated or when it was particularly prevalent, that allows them to have that pattern sort of dissipate, or to acknowledge it, acknowledge the reason why they believe something or do something that is otherwise inexplicable to them, or to gain knowledge and understanding of a specific connection with another person they know. That is also something else that they would do. So I would say yes. And if you're interested in past lives, I would recommend a book called Many Lives, Many Masters, I think it's in English.
I've heard of that. Yeah. Who wrote that? Many Lives, Many Masters.
Is it Wiser? Let me see.
Yeah, I think so. It's Brian L. Wise.
Yes, Wise. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian Wise. Many Lives, Many Masters.
Okay.
And I read it in Italian, so I was.
Is he in the paganism like shtick here, or is he just writing about like the idea of past lives?
He's writing about the idea of past lives and his experiences as a psychotherapist, and how remembering past lives helped, a specific patient that had many psychological issues, and by recalling elements from past lives, she slowly healed from these issues. But yeah, just in case people are interested in past lives, that's an interesting book to read, and it's written like a novel, so it's an easy read.
It's a fun one, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's easy to read.
I've been waiting for my question, if I may, just because what interests me about paganism and nature worship is when I studied religions and getting into trying to understand like how these things developed, when you go far enough back before what we call polytheism, there seemed to be nature worship. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who studies contemporary paganism, that doesn't mean you haven't read and researched the history of these ideas and are aware of how far back some of this stuff goes. Would you say that paganism, maybe not in its contemporary form, but maybe there's a kernel or a basis to paganism that is the oldest form of world religion that we know of? Would you say that it connects itself to ancient nature worship, which precedes these anthropomorphized and personified deities, the way that religions developed with polytheism, then monotheism, etc.?
So this is a question. This is something that a lot of practitioners like to think it is true. Even and maybe especially with shamanism, the idea that shamanism is the proto-religion, that is the first form of religion, and then before the institutionalized dogmatic religions came to be. But I would say that even though there are elements of nature worshipping in ancient times and before the advent of Abrahamic religions, um, I wouldn't say it's the oldest religion, just because it is a claim that, as an academic, it's something that you cannot really prove in any way that it is the oldest religion. So you can say that there are elements in paganism that you find in ancient times, in pre-Christian times, and even way before that. But yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say that paganism is the oldest religion. It's a claim that it can be a belief on the part of practitioners, and some practitioners do believe that, but it is not something that a scholar could state in with any kind of evidence, because it's not something that you cannot study from the prehistoric times until now and find a direct historical link that would say paganism is the most ancient, is the oldest religious form. It's not feasible as research, so it can only be a speculation. But I could say that there are elements of pagan witchcraft and paganism that you definitely find in pre-Christian religions and in the oldest religious forms that have been reported in archaeology and history.
Thank you for that wonderful answer to my question.
Very academic.
Yes, you're very careful. I get it, and I respect that. We had 2 more super chats. No more super chats, please, because I got to let her go. Are you aware if paganism was present within the factions of the, I do not know how to pronounce this, Gulfs, and Ghibellines? Shameless scholar plug. Everyone check it out.
No, I'm not aware of that.
I don't know when this is either. That's another thing that might...
Maybe around 13th century, because I think in Dante Alighieri's the Divine Comedy, they feature the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, which I'm more familiar with the Italian names.
Okay. Shameless mass scholar plug. Everyone check it out. Okay. I don't know where that is to check it out, but I may be missing something here in the super chat. Is this someone you know or something, or you don't know who this is?
No.
Okay. I appreciate the super chat. Last one, and then we'll let you go here. Crossover Maniac, have you heard of the Christ myth theory, pagan Christian parallels, and have you watched part 1 of the Zeitgeist movie?
Yeah, I have watched the Zeitgeist movie, the part one, and I think it is the quintessence of perennialism.
Parallelomania is what she's saying. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. I think so too.
yeah, perennialism. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with what perennialism is.
Are
It's
you
trying.
saying what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Tell us what. I thought you said parallelomania. I think you were thinking parallelomania, but
Well, it has a resemblance to that.
okay.
It's called perennialism, and it's the belief that all gods come from one god and all traditions have one core truth. And perennialism is an element that you find a lot in new age movements, among pagans. It's very common, I think, among those who practice magic, witchcraft, and are interested in esotericism. So they would say that Lilith is the same as a deity from a completely different culture, time, and place, because they have certain elements in common. And so the underlying assumption is that there is, that different deities are one god. So the idea that all the gods are actually one god, all the goddesses are actually one goddess, and all the traditions in history, the religious traditions in history, underlie one core truth. And so you need to find the patterns and the commonalities. And once you have found them, then you have the proof that you have found that underlying truth that is there across different traditions, and it is just masked and layered by cultural elements. Now, this is a belief that a lot of practitioners have and that influence their practices, but it is the exact opposite of what we do in academia. Because in academia, we value greatly the context, the historical
Mhm.
context, the place, all the differences and the nuances. So it is a belief that people can have, and nobody can oppose to that. But in academia, we have the exact opposite outlook on things. So even if there is a very specific difference, like in ancient Rome, you would have that different cities would have different Dianas, for instance, which now is, you find it with the Madonna. So you have different Madonnas from different cities, and they all have different characteristics and things that you can ask them to do. So the specifics, the differences, the nuances, the complexity is highly valued in academic scholarship, in academic work. So it's the exact opposite. Instead of finding the things to put them all together and lump different deities together to say this one deity, you would do the exact opposite. You unpack every deity, every entity, so that you can understand all the nuances and complexities that are related and interrelated with the cultural context, with the time, with the place. So Zeitgeist is the quintessence of that perennialism.
Well put. I'm so glad that I shut up because you really did a number. I was thinking you were just saying, oh, it's just a parallelomania, which it is related to that, where it's like we're gonna make Horus as Jesus and Jesus is this God and that God and this God. And it's
Yeah,
like,
and everybody is, they're all the same,
yeah.
obviously.
That doesn't mean there aren't themes, that there aren't common tropes, but that's also scholarly to say, okay, maybe there's tropes, maybe there's a religious holiday or time of the year where something gets celebrated, but even then you have to parse out and understand that each culture has a different meaning to some of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff to look at the
Exactly.
differences and not
Exactly.
try to fit the square into the circle. And
Yeah, exactly. So it's important to identify common patterns, but it is also important to identify the contextual elements, because otherwise you flatten the complexity and you lose all the nuances that are, behind a specific deity or entity or cultural or religious phenomenon. And that is important. The complexity is highly valued in academic analysis and scholarship.
thank you so much for this. This has been a blast. And Jocelyn says, I love Angela so much. Gotta meet more people like her. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jocelyn. Yeah, she is awesome. I didn't know what to expect because this is our first episode and we were planning it. And Hey, we had some good questions from the audience, and you know, this was a blast. There's so much knowledge in there that you've learned, I'm sure, that we didn't get to unpack today. The least I can do is to ask everybody, please. I did comment this video specifically on Jesus and magic, but her YouTube channel, I did pin it in the comment section. If you would, please comment after this episode, Angela, on the live, and I will pin the comment at the top so everyone can find you so easily and they can go subscribe. You can also support her on her Patreon, where she does a lot of work. You can private message her that way. You can even have one-on-ones with her if you want to talk to her in private. Different things. You can help support her. She is a scholar in the field. She has acquired a PhD, you know, bachelor's, master's, PhD. She will be hopefully publishing her dissertation sometime this summer or by fall, maybe by winter, something like that. You know, it's a lot of work. You can also, if you don't like Patreon, you can one-time donate to her through PayPal. So these are ways to help your scholarly friends. Like if you find a scholar on YouTube that you love and enjoy, or you want to pick their brain or whatever, like these are ways to support them. And I think everything's headed to online anyways. So jump on it. Is there anything about your Patreon or your YouTube you would like to mention?
Yeah, I'm particularly proud of my Patreon community because we have a private Discord server. There's a book club that is led by Andrew, my first patron, who's very active in the community. And we have monthly chats and monthly lectures for the Magus app level patrons. So I'm particularly proud of that community because there are a lot of brilliant, brilliant people, and I really like our conversations. We go quite in depth when it comes to analyzing historic topics, and there's a high level of conversation going on there. So if you are, if you only want to support my work, PayPal is fine. If you want to enter an amazing community, because as I said, I'm really proud of my Patreon community, then I would recommend pledging to my Patreon so that you can get to know the other people that are there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And just letting everybody know, if you want to support us here and what we do as well, Myth Vision, I have a community of Patreon members there as well. We communicate often, and you can ask questions. If you have academics in your mind that you want to see possibly get interviewed on this channel, that's a way to support us. And I can private message with you and email and try to make some of these academics show up on the channel. Because oftentimes what happens, Angela, is like, I don't remember, like I'm one person, right? I can't like know all of the different scholars, and many people who are in my chat are far brighter than I am. And they'll be like, hey, have you heard of this scholar? I'm like, what? I've never heard of this scholar. What do you mean? So they'll private message me in my Patreon, and they'll recommend, and they'll give me ideas and stuff. And I'll be like, okay, cool. So we have a way of direct communication and stuff. And I suspect it's the same for you on your Patreon. Like people can communicate with you and ask questions, or have you ever heard of this? What do you think of that? All that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you're interested, just pledge to my Patreon. I'd be happy to welcome you.
Thank you so much. Any final words to someone out there who might be struggling, or they don't know what to think? They just, any positive words you'd like to give to people? I always do this, by the way. Don't feel like I'm calling you out. I always at the end try to get like, any final words you want to say to somebody right now might be struggling. I don't know.
Something that has been attributed to Galileo Galilei, and it's a quote that I really like, that says, everything is connected by invisible ties. You cannot pick a flower without upsetting a star. And it gives me the sense that everything is interconnected, and that everything that is happening in our life goes through cycles, but it is part of something wider.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We are Myth Vision.